The massive hall stretched out like a dark ocean filled with strange beings from across the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison stood straight and tall beside Ambassador Lisa Carter as they waited for the judgment that would change everything. The air felt heavy with tension, and the smell of different alien atmospheres mixed together in ways that made his nose burn. High, Arbiter Zexthal rose from his crystal throne that floated above the center of the chamber. His body looked like a living glass with lights dancing inside it. When he spoke, his voice rang out clear and cold like winter ice breaking. Every creature in the hall turned to listen. The humans knew this moment would decide their fate. The species called humans has been found guilty of excessive violence and complete disregard for galactic law, Zexthal announced. His words echoed off the curved walls and seemed to bounce back louder each time. They have refused to follow proper protocols. They have shown aggression toward peaceful races. They have demonstrated that they cannot be trusted to exist freely among civilized beings. Jake felt his hands ball into fists at his sides. The charges were lies mixed with half-truths. Yes, humans had fought the Thresh Empire, but only after. The Thresh had attacked human colonies without warning. Yes, they had refused to hand over captured Thresh war criminals, but only because the proposed punishment was basically a vacation on a nice planet instead of real justice for the millions of humans who had died. Lisa placed her hand on his arm in warning. She knew Jake well enough to see the anger building in his eyes. They had both served together in the Thresh War. They had both seen what those monsters had done to human civilians. Now the Council wanted to punish humanity for fighting back. The sentence is complete isolation, Zexthal continued. All hyperspace routes leading to the Sol system will be sealed immediately. No ships will be allowed to enter or leave human space. No communications will be permitted between humans and any other species. This quarantine will remain in place until humanity shows proper behavioral change. Around the chamber, alien representatives nodded their approval. The Valkyrie delegate actually looked happy about the decision. Its tentacles moved in what Jake knew was their version of applause. The Krell representative made a sound like grinding rocks, which meant satisfaction. Even some of the species that had once been friendly to humans seemed relieved. Admiral Ben Parker watched everything from the bridge of his flagship positioned just outside Council space. The transmission came through clear and sharp. He had hoped the Council might show mercy or at least fairness. Instead, they had chosen to cage humanity like dangerous animals. Ben had fought alongside these people for 30 years. He knew what they were capable of when pushed too far. The session began to end as various aliens filed out of the chamber. Jake and Lisa were escorted by Council guards toward their transport ship. The guards were professional but firm. They made it clear that the humans were no longer welcome guests, but prisoners being expelled. "They have no idea what they just did," Lisa whispered to Jake as they walked down the long corridor toward the docking bay. Her voice was quiet, but Jake could hear the cold fury underneath. Lisa had spent 5 years trying to build relationships with these species. She had worked day and night to prove that humans could be trusted partners. Now all of that work was being thrown away. Jake nodded but said nothing. He was thinking about Admiral Parker and the human fleet waiting outside. He was thinking about the billions of people back on Earth and the colonies who would soon learn they had been cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Most of all, he was thinking about what humans did when they were cornered and alone. Their ship launched from the Council station without ceremony. As they flew toward the edge of Council space, Jake stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human colonies were still rebuilding from the Thresh War. Human families were trying to start new lives on frontier worlds. Human scientists were working on projects that could benefit every species in the galaxy. Now all of that would happen in isolation. The last official message sent from human space to the Galactic Council was brief and simple: Ambassador Lisa Carter herself composed it and sent it through all available channels before the hyperspace routes were sealed. The message contained only 7 words, but every alien leader who read it felt a chill they could not explain. Acknowledged. "We will remember this decision." Then the silence began. The great emptiness that the council thought would contain humanity forever. They believed they had solved the human problem with exile and isolation. They thought 5 years or 10 years of loneliness would break human spirit and make them beg to return as obedient servants. The galaxy moved on. Trade continued, peace was declared. The council congratulated itself on maintaining order. But in the dark quiet of the Sol system, something else was beginning. Something the galaxy had never seen before and would never expect. Humanity had always been dangerous when they fought together. Now they would learn what humans could become when they had nothing left to lose and nowhere to run. 5 long years passed in the darkness between stars. The galaxy celebrated its new age of peace while humanity remained locked away in the Sol system like prisoners in a cage they could not see. Trade routes flourished without human interference. The Thresh Empire rebuilt their shattered fleets. Alien species that had once feared human aggression now slept, peacefully knowing the dangerous humans could never reach them again, but the Council had made a terrible mistake. They thought isolation would weaken humanity. They believed loneliness would break human spirit and force them to beg for mercy. Instead, they had given humanity something far more dangerous than freedom. They had given them time to think and time to prepare and time to become something the galaxy had never seen before. Dr. Susan Blake worked 18 hours every day in the deep laboratories beneath Luna Station. Her team of scientists pushed the boundaries of physics itself as they searched for ways around the hyperspace blockade. The labs hummed with constant activity as hundreds of brilliant minds focused on a single goal. If the Council wanted to cut humans off from normal space travel, then humans would find a completely different way to travel. We cannot use their hyperspace lanes, Susan told her colleague Dr. Peter Collins as they studied equations that covered entire walls. So we must make our own roads through reality itself. We must find a way to step outside normal space and time. Meanwhile, back on Earth, every factory and shipyard worked at maximum capacity. General Carl Hayes had transformed the entire human military into something unprecedented in galactic history. Every resource was focused on building ships and weapons and tools for the day when humanity would need them. The message was clear to every human alive. They were alone now, and they would need to be strong enough to stand against the entire galaxy if necessary. Captain Jake Morrison found himself promoted to admiral as humanity reorganized its forces. The ships rolling out of Earth's orbital yards looked nothing like the vessels humans had built before the isolation. These new designs were brutal and efficient with sharp angles and heavy armor. They carried weapons that pushed the limits of known technology. Every line of every ship screamed one message to anyone who saw them. Humans were no longer interested in playing by galactic rules. On Mars, the scientist Dr. Amy Rodriguez made the breakthrough that changed everything. Working in secret laboratories hidden beneath the red planet's surface, she developed something called a quantum fold drive. Unlike hyperspace travel, which required existing lanes and jump points, Amy's invention could tear holes in reality itself. It allowed ships to step outside normal spacetime and emerge anywhere they wanted almost instantly. The first test worked perfectly, Amy reported to Admiral Morrison during one of their encrypted communications. We can reach the Kepler system in 6 hours instead of the 3 days it would take through hyperspace. More importantly, we can do it without using any of the lanes the Council controls. But humanity was not just building ships and weapons. In secret facilities across the solar system, they were also training and planning and preparing for something the galaxy could never imagine. Every human soldier studied alien tactics and weaknesses. Every human pilot learned to fly in ways that would confuse and terrify alien crews. Every human commander planned for battles that had never been fought before. The isolation had done something unexpected to human society. Instead of breaking apart under the pressure of being cut off from the galaxy, humans had come together like never before. Old divisions between nations and colonies disappeared. Political arguments that had seemed important before now felt petty and stupid. Humanity had found a common enemy in the Council and a common goal in eventual freedom. Dr. Susan Blake's research teams made discovery after discovery as they worked in their underground labs. New materials that were stronger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. New energy sources that could power weapons beyond alien imagination. New technologies that turned science fiction into deadly reality. Every breakthrough was shared instantly with research teams on other worlds through quantum communication networks the Council could not detect or block. Admiral Morrison spent his days reviewing reports from across the human sphere. Mining operations on asteroids had tripled their output. Agricultural worlds were producing surplus food to feed growing populations of soldiers and workers. Industrial planets were turning out equipment at rates that would have been impossible before the isolation began. Humanity was transforming itself into something the galaxy had never encountered. The silence from Sol was not the quiet of defeat. It was the silence of a predator lying perfectly still while it planned its attack. Every day that passed made humanity stronger and more unified and more dangerous. Every alien celebration of their successful containment only added fuel to the fire burning in human hearts. 5 years of isolation had given humanity time to grieve their losses in the Thresh War, time to remember every human colony that had been destroyed, time to think about every human family that had been torn apart, time to consider what it meant that the galaxy had sided with the monsters instead of the victims. That grief and anger and sense of betrayal had been forged in the fires of isolation into something much more dangerous than simple revenge. The galaxy believed they had caged a dangerous animal. What they had actually done was give that animal time to evolve into something completely new, something that would make their worst fears about human aggression look like pleasant dreams. The Council had wanted to see behavioral modification in humanity. They were about to get exactly what they had asked for in ways they never could have imagined. When the silence finally broke, it would not be with words or pleas for mercy. It would be with the sound of quantum fold drives tearing holes in reality itself as humanity emerged from their cage, transformed into something the galaxy was utterly unprepared to face. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Outer Rim territories, where merchant ships traveled the loneliest routes through space. Captain Rex Northman of the patrol vessel Golden Wing received the first reports of missing vessels. Ships would send their normal status updates and then simply vanish without any distress signals or debris fields. The disappearances followed no pattern that anyone could understand. 3 more ships failed to reach their destinations this week. Rex reported to his commanding officer during their weekly briefing. The cargo hauler Blue Mountain was due at Station 7 yesterday, but never arrived. The passenger liner Stardancer disappeared somewhere between the Zeta and Beta sectors. Most strange is the science vessel Deep Explorer, which was studying an empty system and just stopped transmitting. What Rex and the Galactic Patrol did not know was that humanity had begun its reconnaissance phase. Dr. Amy Rodriguez's quantum fold drives allowed human ships to move through space without using hyperspace lanes. Admiral Morrison had deployed dozens of stealth vessels throughout the galaxy to gather intelligence on every major world and every fleet position and every weakness they could find. Commander Kate Phillips led one of these shadow missions as she observed the Valkyrie homeworld from a position that should have been impossible to reach. Her ship hung invisible in space using technology that bent light around the hull, while sensors that worked on completely new principles mapped every detail of Valkyrie defenses. The aliens who had celebrated humanity's exile had no idea they were being watched and studied and cataloged for future reference. Their defense grid has exactly 17 critical control nodes. Kate reported back to Earth through quantum communication channels that the Council could not detect. The primary control station orbits their third moon. If we take that out first, the entire defensive network goes dark for 43 minutes while backup systems activate. More than enough time to achieve total orbital superiority. Similar intelligence flowed back from dozens of human scout ships positioned throughout the galaxy. The information painted a clear picture of a galaxy that had grown soft and careless during 5 years of peace. Defense spending had been cut on most worlds. Military fleets had been converted to cargo vessels or simply scrapped. Entire star systems had disbanded their defense forces completely on the Thresh homeworld. Human operative Don Foster moved through the capital city disguised as a Zephyrian trader. His mission was to penetrate the Imperial archives and discover what the Thresh leadership really thought about their victory over humanity. What he found there sent shockwaves through human command when he transmitted his discoveries back to Earth. The documents Don accessed revealed that the Thresh had never intended the isolation to be temporary. Secret meetings between Thresh leaders and council members showed a long-term plan to slowly reduce the quarantine zone until humanity was trapped on Earth alone. Then, when humans were completely helpless, the final phase would begin. Complete extermination of the human species disguised as a necessary response to continued human aggression. They planned this from the beginning, Don reported in his encrypted transmission to Admiral Morrison. The council vote was not about justice or maintaining peace. It was the first step in a plan to commit genocide against our entire species. The documents here show timetables and resource allocations for what they call the final solution to the human problem. This intelligence changed everything for human leadership. What had started as a plan to break free from quarantine became something much larger and more comprehensive. Humanity would not just escape their prison. They would make sure no alien species could ever threaten human existence again. The galaxy had chosen to view humans as a problem that needed to be solved permanently. Now humans would solve the alien problem. In return, more disturbing discoveries followed as human operatives dug deeper into alien communications and secret files. The Krell Empire had been developing biological weapons specifically designed to target human genetics. The Zephyrian Federation had quietly seized all human assets in their space and sold them to fund military expansion. Even species that had seemed friendly to humans had been secretly planning to divide up human colonies once the extermination was complete. Commander Phillips expanded her surveillance network as more human ships joined the reconnaissance effort. Every major alien world now had invisible watchers studying their defenses and recording their military capabilities. The aliens celebrated their successful containment of humanity while human eyes observed every detail of their lives and human minds planned for every possible scenario. The quantum fold technology proved to be even more revolutionary than anyone had expected. Human ships could appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning and disappear just as quickly. Traditional alien sensors could not detect the energy signatures of quantum fold drives. Their defense systems were designed to watch hyperspace jump points that humans no longer needed to use. Admiral Morrison coordinated the growing intelligence network from his command center on Luna Station. Every day brought new reports of alien weaknesses and human opportunities. The galaxy that had seemed so powerful and unified when it condemned humanity was revealed to be fragmented and vulnerable when examined from the shadows. They have made themselves defenseless, Morrison told his staff during one of their strategy meetings. 5 years of peace has made them forget how to fight. They have dismantled their fleets and disbanded their armies. They think the greatest threat to galactic peace is safely locked away in Sol. They have no idea what is really coming for them. The reconnaissance phase continued for months as human operatives gathered every piece of information they could find. Ship movements and fleet positions and defense capabilities and political structures were all cataloged and analyzed. Communication networks were mapped and infiltrated. Supply lines were identified and studied for vulnerabilities, but the most important discovery was not military or technological, it was psychological. The aliens feared humans not because of what humans had done, but because of what they represented. Humanity's refusal to bow down to alien authority threatened the entire foundation of galactic civilization. The Council had not quarantined humanity to maintain peace. They had done it to maintain their own power and control. This knowledge filled every human heart with cold determination. The galaxy had not just imprisoned them, it had marked them for extinction because they dared to be free. Now humanity would show the galaxy what happened when you tried to destroy a species that refused to die quietly. The shadows that moved Unseen through alien space carried with them the promise of reckoning that was coming like a storm across the stars. The attack began on a Tuesday morning according to Galactic Standard Time, when 17 different star systems discovered that their peaceful sleep had become a nightmare. Humanity struck with precision that seemed impossible and coordination that defied every known law of space combat. Quantum fold drives allowed human fleets to appear anywhere they wanted without warning, while their enemies struggled to understand what was happening. The Valkyrie homeworld received the honor of Admiral Morrison's personal attention as his flagship. Retribution materialized directly above their capital city along with 50 other human warships. The sight that greeted Valkyrie Defense Forces was unlike anything they had prepared for. Human vessels looked like instruments of war rather than mere transportation. Every line and angle suggested violence and death and terrible purpose. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the human fleet," his voice broadcast across every communication channel in the system. "You voted to imprison us. You planned our extinction. You celebrated our isolation while you prepared for our destruction. Today you face the consequences of those choices." The Valkyrie Defense Fleet had been caught completely unprepared for an attack that should have been impossible. Their sensors had detected nothing until human ships were already in orbit above their world. Half their defensive platforms were destroyed before they could even activate their weapon systems. The carefully planned defensive grid that had protected their world for centuries crumbled in 17 minutes, exactly as Commander Phillips had predicted. But Admiral Morrison's forces did not target civilian populations or residential areas. Instead, they struck with surgical precision at military installations and government centers and communication arrays. Every shot was calculated to disable rather than destroy unnecessarily. This was not random violence but carefully planned. Justice delivered by people who understood the difference between warfare and massacre. Meanwhile, Commander Helen Turner led the assault on Thresh Empire border fortresses that had once seemed impregnable to human attack. These same installations had been used to launch the surprise attacks that started the Thresh War years earlier. Now human forces equipped with 5 years of technological advancement and careful planning reduced them to floating debris in hours. Rather than the months it had taken during the previous conflict, the quantum fold drives proved to be humanity's decisive advantage in every battle. While alien forces tried to coordinate their defenses using hyperspace communication networks that took hours or days to carry messages, human commanders could redeploy their fleets instantly. Ships would attack one target and then vanish only, to appear on the opposite side of the galaxy minutes later to strike another objective. General Carl Hayes commanded the Siege of Council Fleet Command from his flagship Vindication as human forces systematically destroyed the orbital installations that protected the Council's military headquarters. The massive space fortresses had been designed to repel traditional attacks through hyperspace jump points. They were completely helpless against enemies that could appear anywhere in normal space without using hyperspace lanes at all. "Sir, the Council fleet is attempting to regroup at Rally Point 7, reported Captain Paul Grant as he monitored enemy communications from the bridge of Vindication. "Let them gather," Hayes replied with cold satisfaction. "Dr. Rodriguez's new weapons are ready for field testing. We shall see how well Council ships perform against technology they cannot understand." On Zephyr, humanity's former allies found themselves facing a choice they had hoped never to make. Ambassador Lisa Carter appeared before their parliament not as a prisoner or supplicant, but as the representative of a power that could no longer be ignored or dismissed. Her message was simple and direct and left no room for misunderstanding. "You voted for our isolation when we needed your support," Lisa told the assembled Zephyrian leaders. "You remained silent when the Council planned our extinction. Now you can choose to stay neutral in this conflict, or you can share the same fate as those who declared themselves our enemies." The Zephyrians chose neutrality. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as human forces struck target after target with devastating effectiveness. The Krell mining worlds that supplied raw materials for alien fleets found their operations shut down by human raiders who appeared from nowhere. The Thraxian shipyards that built Council warships discovered that their orbital facilities could be destroyed faster than they could be rebuilt. Dr. Susan Blake's new weapons performed beyond even her own expectations as human ships, unleashed technologies that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. Energy beams that could slice through any known armor, projectiles that could penetrate force fields by existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, defensive systems that made human ships nearly invisible to traditional sensors and targeting systems. The psychological effect of humanity's return was even more devastating than the physical damage. For 5 years, the galaxy had lived in peace, believing that the dangerous humans were safely contained. Now that peace was revealed to be an illusion maintained only by human absence. The species that aliens had tried to cage had emerged from their prison, transformed into something far more dangerous than they had ever been before. Reports flooded into Council headquarters describing impossible human capabilities and incomprehensible human technologies. Ships that could travel faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Weapons that could destroy matter at the atomic level. Defenses that made human vessels seem like ghosts that could not be touched by alien weapons. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of humanity's return was their restraint. They struck military targets with precision that left civilian populations largely untouched. They disabled enemy ships rather than destroying them completely when surrender was offered quickly enough. They followed the same rules of warfare they had tried to teach the galaxy during the Thresh conflict. This was not the wild aggression that alien propaganda had described. This was controlled violence applied with surgical precision by people who understood exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it. The humans had not become monsters during their isolation. They had become something much more dangerous. They had become competent. High Arbiter Zexfil watched his perfect galactic order collapse from the Council's hidden fortress world as emergency reports arrived from across known space. In 1 week, human forces had crippled the military capacity of dozens of star systems and brought the galaxy's most powerful fleets to their knees. The isolation that was supposed to weaken humanity had instead forged them into the most effective military force the galaxy had ever encountered. High Arbiter Zexfil stood in the emergency session chamber deep within Nexus Prime as reports of disaster poured in from across the galaxy. The hidden fortress world that housed the Council's most secure facilities shook with each new transmission that arrived through the quantum communication networks. 300 military targets had been hit in the first week alone, and human forces showed no signs of slowing their relentless advance. "How is this possible?" demanded the Krell representative as his scales shifted to deep red with anxiety and fear. "Our intelligence services assured us that humanity was contained and effectively neutralized. They said human technology had stagnated during the isolation period. They promised us that 5 years of quarantine would break human spirit completely." Dr. Susan Blake would have found bitter satisfaction in those words if she could have heard them from her laboratory on Luna Station. While the galaxy had celebrated 5 years of peace, humanity had been working with focused determination that bordered on obsession. Every human scientist and engineer and researcher had devoted their lives to a single goal: breaking free from the cage that alien arrogance had built around them. The Council members argued and blamed each other as their perfect order crumbled around them. Some demanded immediate negotiation with human forces. Others called for the activation of ancient weapon systems that had not been used for millennia. A few suggested that perhaps they should have listened to the warnings about human determination and resourcefulness that their own intelligence services had provided years earlier. General Carl Hayes watched the siege of Council Fleet Command unfold from the bridge of his flagship as human forces systematically dismantled the orbital defenses that protected the Council's military nerve center. The massive space fortresses that guarded the headquarters had been designed by the greatest alien military minds to withstand any conceivable attack. They had not been designed to face enemies who could ignore the basic assumptions of space warfare: human Ships appeared inside the defensive perimeter without using any of the hyperspace jump points that the fortresses were built to guard. The quantum fold drives allowed Admiral Morrison's forces to bypass every layer of protection and strike directly at the heart of Council military power. Ancient weapon systems that had never failed before found themselves targeting enemies that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. "Sir, the Council fleet is attempting to regroup at Rally Point 7, Captain Paul Grant reported as he monitored the desperate alien communications. Admiral Exmoor is calling for all available ships to join the final defense of Council authority." "Excellent," Hayes replied as he studied the tactical display showing enemy fleet movements. "Dr. Rodriguez's quantum disruptors are fully charged and ready for combat testing. We shall give the Council a demonstration of what humanity learned during 5 years of enforced silence." The final battle of the war began in the Centauri Nebula, where over 2,000 ships, representing dozens of alien species, gathered to make their last stand against human forces. The combined Council fleet was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Their commanders expected a traditional engagement with battle lines and coordinated attacks and the familiar patterns of space warfare that had defined conflicts for thousands of years. Instead, they witnessed something that would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. Human ships moved through space in ways that violated every known principle of physics and tactical doctrine. They appeared and disappeared at will. They struck from impossible angles and vanished before return fire could be targeted. Most terrifying of all, they carried weapons that seemed to unravel the very fabric of reality itself. Dr. Amy Rodriguez's quantum disruptors did not simply destroy enemy ships. They caused target vessels to cease existing in any meaningful sense. Matter was scattered across multiple dimensions, simultaneously leaving behind empty space. Where proud warships had been moments before, entire battleships with crews of thousands simply vanished from reality as if they had never been built at all. Admiral Morrison observed the battle from the Bridge of Retribution as his forces demonstrated the full extent of human technological advancement. The weapons and defenses and propulsion systems that humanity had developed during their isolation were not just superior to alien equivalents. They operated on completely different principles that alien science could not comprehend or counter. "Send a message to all surviving Council forces," Morrison ordered as he watched enemy formations crumble before the human advance. "They have one opportunity to surrender and be treated according to the galactic conventions of warfare that they taught us. If they continue fighting, they will face the full extent of what humanity learned during 5 years of solitude." The response from Council forces was immediate and decisive. Ship after ship broadcast surrender signals as their commanders realized the hopelessness of their situation. The technological gap between human and alien capabilities had become so vast that continued resistance would be nothing more than suicide. Of the 2,000 vessels that had rallied to defend the Council, fewer than 400 survived to see the end of the battle. But the human victory was not achieved through superior numbers or overwhelming firepower alone. It was the result of careful planning and precise execution and complete understanding of both human capabilities and alien weaknesses. Every target had been chosen for maximum psychological impact. Every weapon had been designed to demonstrate human technological superiority. Every tactic had been calculated to break alien morale as completely as possible. The war that would later be remembered as the Reckoning lasted only 6 months from beginning to end. In that time, humanity had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy and proven that isolation had made them stronger rather than weaker. The species that the Council had tried to contain had emerged from their cage transformed into something the galaxy was utterly unprepared to face. High Arbiter Zexthal found himself kneeling in the same chamber where he had once pronounced humanity's exile as Admiral Morrison stood before him wearing the uniform of a conquering fleet. The reversal was complete and absolute. The judge had become the prisoner and the prisoner had become the judge. The silence that the Council had imposed on humanity had been broken by the sound of their own defeat. "You demanded that we demonstrate," Acceptable behavioral modification, Morrison said as he looked down at the being who had sentenced humanity to isolation. We learned exactly what you taught us. We learned that might makes right in this galaxy. We learned that the strong impose their will on the weak. Most importantly, we learned that those who try to cage humanity do so at their own peril. The terms of surrender were swift and decisive and left no room for negotiation or appeal. The Galactic Council was dissolved immediately and permanently. The various empires and federations could govern themselves however they chose, but they would do so under humanity's watchful protection. Any species that threatened interstellar peace would face the same choice the Council had given humanity 5 years earlier: isolation or complete destruction. The galaxy that emerged from the reckoning was fundamentally different from the one that had existed before humanity's return. Ancient power structures that had dominated interstellar politics for thousands of years lay in ruins. The species that had once looked down on humans as dangerous primitives now found themselves living under the protection of the very people they had tried to destroy. Dr. Amy Rodriguez accepted her appointment as head of the new Galactic Communications Authority with the same quiet determination she had brought to developing the quantum fold drive. Her first act was to establish communication networks that could never again be used to isolate any species from the broader galactic community. Every world would have access to information and contact with other civilizations, regardless of their political status or military power. No species will ever again face the silence we endured, Amy announced during her first address to the reformed Galactic Assembly. Communication is a fundamental right that cannot be revoked by political disagreement or military conquest. Any attempt to cut off a world or system from contact with the galaxy will be considered an act of war against all free peoples. Dr. Susan Blake found herself in charge of the Interstellar Research Consortium with a mandate to share human technological advances with any species willing to work toward genuine peace. The quantum disruptors and fold drives and advanced materials that had won the war would now be used to build a better future for everyone. But access to these technologies came with strict conditions that could not be negotiated or ignored. Knowledge is power, and power must be used responsibly, Susan explained to a gathering of alien scientists and engineers. We will share what we have learned, but only with those who demonstrate that they understand the responsibilities that come with such capabilities. The galaxy has seen what happens when advanced technology falls into the wrong hands. High Arbiter Zexthel spent his remaining days in a comfortable but secure facility on Earth, where human scholars interviewed him about the old galactic order. His testimony revealed the depth of corruption and arrogance that had infected the Council system. The isolation of humanity had not been an aberration, but the inevitable result of a government that viewed different peoples as problems to be managed rather than partners to be respected. Admiral Morrison transitioned from military commander to the first human galactic governor with responsibilities that stretched across hundreds of star systems. His headquarters on Luna Station became the center of a new kind of interstellar government built on principles of voluntary cooperation rather than forced submission. Species that chose to work with humanity found themselves prospering in ways they had never imagined possible, but the most significant change was not technological or political but philosophical. Ambassador Lisa Carter addressed the reformed Galactic Assembly with words that would be quoted and studied for generations to come. Standing at the podium where alien leaders had once condemned humanity, she spoke with the authority of someone who had witnessed both the worst and best of galactic civilization. You tried to silence us because you feared what we represented, Lisa said as her voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. We were a species that refused to bow to authority simply because that authority existed. We would not accept that might makes right or that the strong should dominate the weak. That fear was justified because we are exactly what you thought we were and more. She paused to look out at the representatives of dozens of worlds and species who now listened with respect rather than contempt. But you misunderstood our nature completely. We never wanted to rule over you or impose our will through force. We only wanted to be left alone to grow and explore and discover what we could become. You gave us 5 years of silence, and in that silence we found our strength and our unity and our purpose. The audience remained perfectly quiet as Lisa continued her address. We emerged from isolation not as conquerors seeking revenge, but as guardians you never knew the galaxy needed. The choice is now yours. Work with us to build something better than the Council ever was, or learn what happens to those who mistake our mercy for weakness. The galaxy chose cooperation. Trade resumed along routes protected by human patrol fleets that could appear anywhere trouble might develop. Scientific research flourished under the guidance of the Interstellar Research Consortium. Communication networks carried information and ideas across vast distances without interference or censorship. The peace that the Council had claimed to maintain through force was achieved through mutual respect and shared prosperity, but humanity had not forgotten the lessons learned during their isolation. Every human world maintained defensive capabilities that could repel any conceivable attack. Every human ship carried weapons that reminded potential enemies of the price of aggression. The galaxy lived in peace not because humans were gentle, but because they were too dangerous to challenge. In the years that followed, historians would debate whether humanity's response to their exile had been justice or vengeance. Academic conferences would analyze every aspect of the reckoning and its aftermath. Political theorists would study the new galactic order as an example of how power should be exercised responsibly, but those who had lived through the terrible silence and the war that ended it understood the truth that scholars could only guess. The galaxy had tried to cage the one species that valued freedom above all else. They had attempted to break people who became stronger when they were alone. Most importantly, they had threatened the extinction of a species that had never learned how to surrender. The Council had demanded behavioral modification from humanity, and they had received exactly what they asked for. Humans had learned to be patient and careful and absolutely ruthless when their survival was threatened. They had discovered that isolation could forge unity and that silence could be more terrifying than any threat. The galaxy would never again make the mistake of underestimating human determination or misunderstanding human nature. Some lessons could only be learned through experience, and the price of that education had been higher than anyone could have imagined. The silence that the Council had imposed as punishment had become the foundation of human victory. Humanity had been left in silence, and the galaxy had paid dearly for that choice. The cage that was meant to contain them had become the forge that transformed them into something unprecedented in galactic history. The species that emerged from 5 years of isolation was still recognizably human, but also something entirely new. Something that would ensure the galaxy never forgot the consequences of trying to silence those who refused to be quiet.